On June 2nd, 2026, Andrew Richard Lukehart was executed in Florida after spending 3 decades on death row, and his execution marked the end of a case that many believed should never have happened. Years before he killed 5-month-old Gabrielle Hanshaw, Andrew had already been convicted of brutally abusing another infant. Despite the severity of that crime, he was sentenced to probation instead of prison. While still serving that probation, he moved into the home of his girlfriend, a single mother, and her 2 young daughters. Less than a year later, another baby was dead. To understand the full story, you have to look back at Andrew's past. This wasn't his first offense. In April of 1994, he was actually picked up by law enforcement for a brutal case of aggravated child abuse. An 8-month-old baby had been beaten and almost drowned in a bathtub. He ended up serving 10 months in jail, got hit with 4 years of probation, and was completely cut off from seeing the victim. The state also forced him to go through anger control and parenting classes. During that probation, Andrew began living with Misty Rowe and her daughters, 2-year-old Ashley and 5-month-old Gabrielle Hanshaw, in Jacksonville, Florida. On February 25, 1996, the family spent the afternoon running errands before returning home. Ashley was sick, so Misty took her into a bedroom for a nap. Andrew offered to watch Gabrielle while Misty rested with her older daughter. A short time later, Andrew entered the bedroom to retrieve a clean diaper, saying he was going to change the baby. Misty directed him to where the baby wipes were kept. It was the last time she ever saw Gabrielle alive. The problem for Andrew was that Gabrielle would not stay still. She kept moving around so much that he became frustrated by his inability to remove her diaper. So he grabbed the baby's head and slammed it into the floor. He claimed it was to make her stay still, repeating the action at least 5 times until she was dead. Around 5 p.m., Misty heard her car starting outside. Looking through the window, she saw Andrew driving away in her vehicle. Gabrielle was gone. 30 minutes later, Andrew Lukehart called from a convenience store and told Misty to call 911. He claimed that while he briefly stepped outside, a man driving a blue Chevrolet Blazer had entered the house, kidnapped Gabrielle, and escaped before he could stop him. He sounded frantic, insisting he had chased the vehicle and threatening to kill himself if anything happened to the baby. Law enforcement immediately launched a massive search for the non-existent kidnapper. Deputies, helicopters, and search teams spent hours searching for a blue SUV that never existed. Later that evening, Andrew surrendered to a Florida Highway Patrol trooper after wandering onto the officer's property. Although he repeatedly changed his account of what had happened, investigators initially had no evidence to arrest him. Throughout the night, he continued giving conflicting stories, altering key details whenever detectives questioned inconsistencies. Investigators secretly recorded a conversation between Andrew and Misty while they sat together in the back of a patrol car. During the conversation, Andrew accidentally contradicted his original kidnapping story and made several suspicious statements, including speculating about how long he might go to prison. Detectives began realizing the kidnapping had likely been fabricated. The following morning, investigators confronted Andrew once again. After nearly 18 hours of false stories, detectives persuaded him to tell the truth. Andrew admitted there had never been a kidnapper. He claimed Gabrielle had been accidentally injured after falling and said he panicked when she stopped breathing. He then led investigators to a secluded pond off Normandy Boulevard. There, officers recovered the body of 5-month-old Gabrielle floating in shallow water. Andrew initially claimed he had gently placed her in the pond, but later admitted he had thrown her body into the water before driving to a pay phone and inventing the kidnapping story. At trial, medical evidence completely destroyed Andrew's explanation. The medical examiner testified that Gabrielle had suffered multiple fresh bruises, 5 separate injuries to her skull, and 2 distinct skull fractures caused by separate blows. The injuries were inconsistent with an accidental fall and instead showed repeated blunt force trauma. Evidence also disproved Andrew's claim that he had been changing Gabrielle's diaper when she was injured. Detectives recovered a clean diaper lying untouched inside the home, while Gabrielle was found still wearing the same soiled diaper she had been wearing earlier that day. When Andrew testified, he admitted he had lied repeatedly during the investigation. He acknowledged using force to push the baby down several times before she became unresponsive and admitted fabricating every kidnapping story he had told police. During the penalty phase, jurors learned about Andrew's earlier conviction for abusing an 8-month-old baby. The prosecution argued that the state had already given him a second chance by placing him on probation instead of imprisoning him, and while still under court supervision, he killed another infant. The defense presented evidence of Andrew's troubled childhood, including severe abuse, substance addiction from an early age, low intellectual functioning, and mental health disorders. Although the judge considered those factors, they were outweighed by the brutality of the crime and Andrew's prior child abuse conviction. The jury recommended a death sentence by a vote of 9-3, and the judge imposed the death penalty for Gabrielle's murder, along with a 15-year sentence for child abuse. Over the next 30 years, Andrew exhausted every appeal. His attorneys unsuccessfully challenged Florida's execution protocol, arguing that his kidney disease could cause him unnecessary pain during lethal injection. The courts rejected those claims, and his execution proceeded as scheduled. On June 2, 2026, Andrew Richard Lukehart was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. During his final statement, he looked toward Gabrielle's mother, apologized, and recited Luke 23:34, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He was pronounced dead at 6:19 p.m. Andrew Lukehart lived to the age of 53. Gabrielle Hanshaw was only 5 months old when her life was taken. The case remains one of Florida's most disturbing child murder cases, raising lasting questions about whether earlier intervention after Andrew's first conviction could have prevented a second innocent child from losing her life. On June 25, 2026, 74-year-old Dusty Ray Spencer was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison after spending more than 3 decades on death row. His execution marked a significant moment in Florida's modern history, as he became the oldest inmate executed in the state during the modern death penalty era. But long before his final moments, Spencer had become known for a crime that exposed serious failures in the way domestic violence cases were handled and ultimately changed Florida law. The case centered on the brutal murder of his 40-year-old wife, Karen Spencer, on January 18, 1992. By the time she was killed, Karen had already endured months of escalating abuse and repeated threats. Those warning signs had been reported to authorities, yet they failed to prevent the deadly attack that followed. Just weeks before the murder, Spencer had been arrested and jailed after violently assaulting Karen. During that time, he called her from jail and made a chilling promise. He told her he would unalive her once he was released. The threat was reported to law enforcement, but no additional protective measures were put in place. Despite the threats, she apparently hoped the violence would end. Instead, his release only gave him another opportunity to attack. On January 4, 1992, only days after leaving jail, Spencer assaulted Karen again inside their home. Armed with a clothes iron, he repeatedly struck her, causing severe facial injuries. Her teenage son, Timothy Johnson, awoke to the sound of his mother's screams and rushed to stop the assault. Realizing he had been interrupted, Spencer fled before police arrived. Karen was taken to a hospital where doctors treated her injuries and closed deep wounds on her face with 11 stitches. Although she later discovered Spencer's location and informed authorities, he was not immediately arrested. No warrant was issued, allowing him to remain free. 2 weeks later, on January 18, Spencer returned for what would become his final and most violent attack. That afternoon, Karen was outside in the backyard of the family home in Orange County when Spencer confronted her. Without warning, he attacked her with a brick, striking her repeatedly in the head. As she fought for her life, Spencer armed himself with a knife and stabbed her multiple times in the chest. Once again, Timothy Johnson found himself witnessing unimaginable violence. Seeing his mother under attack, the teenager ran inside the house and grabbed a .22 caliber rifle. He rushed back outside, aimed the weapon at Spencer, and pulled the trigger. The rifle misfired. The failed shot left Timothy defenseless. Spencer immediately turned toward the teenager, threatening him with the bloody knife, forcing Timothy to flee to a nearby neighbor's house, and 911 was called. By the time deputies arrived, Karen Spencer had died from the combination of blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds. Dusty Spencer had already escaped the scene. Investigators quickly launched a manhunt. Evidence collected from the crime scene, along with eyewitness testimony from Timothy, established a clear timeline of the attack. 2 days after the murder, deputies located and arrested him without further incident, bringing an end to the search. Karen and Dusty Spencer had met only a few years earlier when she hired him to perform painting work at her home. Their business relationship developed into a romance, and the couple married in 1989. Together, they operated a painting company known as A+ Painting. Karen also had 3 sons from a previous marriage, though only her youngest son, Timothy, still lived at home. According to later reports, the marriage eventually deteriorated. Karen decided she wanted a divorce, and from that point the abuse intensified. Repeated assaults, threats, and intimidation became increasingly common. Yet, under Florida's domestic violence laws at the time, officers often had limited authority to make arrests unless they directly witnessed the violence themselves. Those legal limitations became a major focus during the investigation and after the trial. Dusty Ray Spencer found guilty of first-degree murder for killing Karen Spencer. He was also convicted of attempted second-degree murder, aggravated assault, and aggravated battery for attacking Timothy Johnson during the incident. Later in 1992, Spencer was sentenced to death. Meanwhile, Karen Spencer's murder had already left a lasting impact beyond the courtroom. Public attention surrounding the case exposed weaknesses in Florida's response to domestic violence. Lawmakers enacted reforms that gave police greater authority to arrest suspected abusers based on evidence rather than requiring an officer to witness the assault firsthand. Officers also became required to provide victims with information about shelters, counseling, medical services, and legal protections. For his last meal, Spencer ordered a pizza, French fries, and a milkshake. On the evening of June 25, Spencer was escorted into Florida's execution chamber and secured to the gurney. After the warden asked whether he wished to make a final statement, Spencer apologized to Karen's family, and in his final statement, Spencer said, "Sorry, sorry to the family. Into thy hands I commit my spirit and my soul. I'm on my way, Lord." At 6:10 p.m., Dusty Ray Spencer was pronounced dead.